Hi, folks, and welcome to Lassoing Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Garth Nichols.
And I am the other host, Jason Rogers.
Welcome to Season 3, Jason, the second podcast of Season 3, and we continue to build on our amazing array of guests. And we got another guest today who's also named Jason. So, Jason, take it away.
Never enough Jasons, right? So I'd like to welcome Jason, who's a current director of athletics at a program called the Edge School here in Calgary. It's a 4 to 12 school with about 400 students. As a member of the school's senior leadership team, he has oversight of the athletic program, which is immense and very impressive if you don't know about it already. And he's also oversees revenue generating activities at the school, like camps, clinics, and facility rentals. Prior to his time at Edge, Jason was working in sports and leadership at post-secondary level with stops at the University of Northern British Columbia, Seneca College in Toronto, most recently as Director of Athletics at the University of Calgary. And it doesn't stop there, Garth. He also served in various capacities on many boards of directors, including recently as president of the Alberta Basketball Association, in addition to coaching grassroots to the university level basketball. Jason's proud CNFX alum, and it's no surprise that that's in there. And he was part of back-to-back national championships as a student athlete. And you can't see this on the podcast, but he is a formidable 6'8". Okay, so you can imagine a giant on the other end of that microphone.
And Jason's dad, and not wearing my X ring today. So for any listeners out there, I apologize.
Yeah, no, you're going to be shamed or even let back, Jason. I don't know. No. Outside sport and professional accomplishments, Jason's a dad, two teenage girls, both student athletes, and spends most of his time driving to and from gyms and pools. Jason, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. You've been a good friend over a long time, and I can hardly wait to hear what you have to say on this podcast.
Well, thanks for the kind words in the intro, though, there, Jason. And Garth, pleasure meeting you. Been listening to the pod here for a while and heard quite a bit about you from Jason. So just happy to spend the next 20 minutes with both of you and looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Great to have you on the pod. So you said you've listened to the pod before, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I've been trying to share the merits of the show with anyone who will listen, and there are quite a few I find who are listening. I'm a big supporter, and I've always loved the show itself. Being Ted Lasso, but for many reasons, just the leadership piece, the soccer piece, the sport piece, and the humor side of the show as well. But secondly, I've been leading people for quite some time now, but as both of you allude to continuously, leadership is a journey, and I continue to learn through your pod. So anyways, happy to be not just a one-time listener, many-time listener, and now happy to be a guest.
Oh, shucks, Jason. I really appreciate those words. And for those listeners who are new to the show, this might be your first time in it. This podcast where we dive into individual episodes of the hit TV series Ted Lasso to learn a little bit more about how to lead in a better, kinder, and more compelling way. We've created this podcast out of our love of learning, leadership, and of course, Ted Lasso.
Yeah, and what we like to say is that one of our big learnings for us over the last 2 seasons was that Jason and I actually use this time to reflect on what's important to us about leadership and to invite you and guests into this reflection. And so to do this, we talk about our favorite characters of the episode, leadership nuggets of gold, and we also take a stab at renaming each episode just for fun. And then we'll leave you with a leadership challenge based on our learnings.
All right, Jason, you ready for today?
Yeah, let's dive in.
All right, let's get this episode started. Jason, we are in season 3. What have you been hearing from our listeners so far?
Well, after last week's episode, my parents gave this review. They said, "Son, we're so proud of you. We actually thought we were the only ones listening to this thing because we gave a rundown of all the stats in last week's episode." And they don't even listen that often. So they thought the breakdown of the metrics was pretty impressive. And they asked me if I was lying. And I said, no, it's all, it's all legit. So that's what they're saying. What have you heard out there?
Well, listen, to be honest with you, not too much these days. Most of my network is in education, and it's been March break recently. So hopefully,
I've heard all about that.
Hopefully, all my colleagues and friends are relaxing and re-energizing. And it makes me think about the ebbs and flows of the school year, but also of office culture. And I think this episode really does announce that as a major theme throughout. It's almost like a lesson in how to build culture and how not to build culture. Keeley started a new office. Trent Crimm's investigating and observing the Lasso way. This really begins in earnest in this season. So super pumped.
Got it. With that, let's jump into the episode summary. Garth, I took the last one, so why don't you take this one?
Yeah, this one's called I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea. It originally aired on Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. In this episode, we see English clubs hear rumors that a top player, Zava, is moving to London, and Richmond takes on their first game back in the Premiership League. Leadership and personal struggles intertwine as Ted and the team navigate complex relationships and professional demands. So we see a glimpse of the personal invading or impressing itself into the professional. And then Trent Crimm, begins his book about the club. And it's really interesting. He says, I think there's a story to tell here about the club and the culture itself. So yeah, that's what I have to look forward to.
Nicely done, Garth. I think this episode also gives insight to Keely's new work venture and her struggles with organizational culture and how Ted is seeing Roy as a true leader of the club. As he asked Troy to help correct the trust issues that Trent is running into. So lots going on, and I can't wait to see the rest of the season unfold.
Yeah, and we hear from Ted as well a little bit of I think it's strange that we're still here. He says that to Beard a couple of times. I think it's strange that we're still here. So it's a couple of great points there. Yeah.
Right on. Well, enough from us. Jason, let's get to our favorite characters, and we want to hear from you. So, Jason, why don't you lead us off? In this episode, or you can even go as far as in this series, who's your favorite character and why?
Yeah, no, I'll be honest with both of you guys. This is probably one of my favorite segments of the show here, and you go back and forth every week on this. So, this is probably not going to be an overly hot take since it is the namesake of the show. But I'm definitely a Ted guy. I actually have a Ted bobblehead here beside me on my desk to remind me about what I've learned through this show as well. But especially in this episode, I think he shines. I'm prepping for this. I was like, maybe there's another character, but to me, this was even though it didn't have a lot of screen time, but he shined in the moments that he had. And I just, a few things that stuck out to me were one, I really liked the way that he intentionally had Trent and Roy in that office together. Right. We knew that this was going to be an important relationship that was going to make or break. There was reference to that in the show, make or break the season for the team, but also the book for Trent. Right. And I think everyone would be invested in having a good story being told about their team. So, it speaks to the confidence also that Ted has in those two to be able to work it out, but especially Roy. Right. And be able to work through some of the issues that he's had with Trent since day one of his premiership career. So, the other under the radar piece I thought that really stood out to me with Ted this week was just the authenticity that he demonstrated throughout, especially trying to connect to some of his colleagues or even friends, right? So, Keely and Roy going through their breakup, just that late night text that he sent to Keely, I thought was a really cool moment. I had to rewind the episode and watch it a couple times to see what the text actually said before I wanted to speak about it on the podcast. But I mean, to me, it just showed that next level of connection, getting to know the person. And then also just the fun kind of exchange they had in the locker room around, you want to talk about it. Made light of it a little bit, but demonstrated that he was there for Roy, not only as a colleague, but as a friend. So to me, it just demonstrates the need to connect to people beyond their role and as people.
Well, anybody who's a friend of Roy is a friend of mine, Jason. So I think that's, pretty important to start with. But I think, you hit it on the head. I mean, Ted is the most authentic leader we can find. I think in our leadership, carrying authenticity goes a really long way, certainly with our followers. Well done, Jace. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank
You're
you.
killing it. So, Garth, what about you? Why don't you follow up? Who's your lead this time?
Yeah, I'll just jump on something that Jason just mentioned. And for me, it has to be Keely. Like, this episode shows, like her resilience and persistence in how a new leader can use empathy, curiosity, and kindness to shift cultures at work. And we start to see this, as I mentioned, play out over the course of a season. And if I can take a page out of it, we had David Coffey on this podcast a couple of episodes ago. She really leans into the innovator's compass. I think she's creating a culture with and not for her employees.
Yeah.
It begins with her CFO. She uses observation. She uses questions to really dive in and get to know people. So I mean, that's just one example for why I love her so much in this episode. What about you, Jason?
I know I took a week off last week from Roy Kent.
Shocker.
It was a big shock to everybody.
If
but
you
not
didn't
to worry.
Listen to our last episode, go back.
Get in there. But I'm back. In this episode, see Roy step into a leadership role and address the trust issue head on. When he tells the team that they can talk around Trent Krim, you can see everybody sit back and listen and say, his word is really gold. And, they bring Trent into the circle of trust. And this is a shout out to Simon Sinek. If you haven't read the book, Leaders Eat Last, he speaks extensively about circle of trust and what that looks like in a leadership context. So he's seen as a true leader in the locker room. And, I think he's given legs to Trent's important project. So back to Roy. So I think it's time to get out of the mind of Roy and into the mind of our guest, Jason Kerswill. So Jason, the next segment of this podcast is questions we've come up for you. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm open book. Let's do this, guys.
All right. As is a tradition, Garth, you go first.
Again, geez, you always do this.
It's all you, buddy.
All right, Jason. Yep. Question number 1. In the culture of an athletic program, of which you've led several at this point. Mm-hmm. You've got so many different shareholders, stakeholders, people invested in the program, parents, families, students, no doubt the organization as well, the institution as well. What are key elements of a thriving culture? Like, if you were to look at some of the cultures you've built, mm-hmm. what are some of the key elements to make that culture thrive?
Yeah, a few items come to mind there, Garth. I think I'm going to start with one thing that's evident in the show too, with some of the communication back and forth with some of the characters, but it's just outlining those clear expectations and standards. When you have a culture that you want to establish with a team in the workplace, with a group of individuals coming together for a common purpose, if you don't outline those clear expectations and standards from the get-go, I find that you're at risk of maybe the stronger voices in the room leading you in one direction that maybe you actually didn't want the group to go. So kind of with that, to me, another important area there is then the accountability towards those clear expectations and standards. So it's got to be leadership down. And I say that, not that the leaders in the room or the team or again, in the workplace need to necessarily be the ones that are going to establish the culture, but everyone is going to be watching what the leader does. In fact, I would almost advocate if the standards can be put on paper or pen to paper with athletes or with coaches and leadership in the room. Same with if you had your staff with you, you're actually going to get more ownership, more buy-in. These are all things that we all know, right? But I think once you get to the piece where, yes, there's accountability from leadership down, but once the athletes, I'm going to speak specifically to athletic programs here, once the athletes start to hold themselves accountable, I think that's when you've struck gold in terms of a leader or a coach, right? And we talk a lot about that here at Edge School. I've spoken about it to other coaches at the university level as well. So when someone says, well, how do you know a team has good culture? To me, that's where if I go in to a practice and I watch a practice or I watch a team meeting afterwards and I hear like verbiage, like words being used to describe what they want to see on the ice or on the basketball court or in the pool, whatever it might be, I know there's some good culture there. And then the accountability piece, when the kids are actually holding themselves accountable to the team standards, I think, again, you've won. I think next, and falls right in line with that, would be communication, right? And you talked about the different stakeholders, Garth, in your question. I think communication amongst all the stakeholders is vital, especially when we're dealing with young student athletes at this level, the secondary level prior to post-secondary. Having the communication between coach and player, obviously critical, but the involvement of a parent in that or parents in that is extremely important. And then, at the school that I work in, we're also dealing with agents who are representing kids at a young age. Yeah. So they're included, right? It's that making sure that everyone in that network is on the same page. Next one would be trust, right? Again, I think with clear expectations, clear communication, that's where trust can be developed. Without trust in that culture, I think things can fall apart quickly. You want people to be open and share their ideas, their concepts. Talk a lot about psychological safety. Unless there's a trusting environment, student athletes aren't going to feel psychologically safe. I want them more than anything to be able to experiment with their sport, make mistakes in an environment where they feel that's okay to do that so they can continue to grow. And I actually look for the same thing in my employees as well. The next one is that pursuit of something larger than yourself, right? And a shared purpose. Again, if a group has that, I think you can go a long way. But again, can't be done without the first three that I mentioned already. And then the last thing I'll add in there too, and we were actually just talking about this yesterday at the school. It's one thing to put the banners and the posters and up and all the sayings around the room or in your team handbook, but and any leader, any person can really do that, especially with Google. You can find those motivational images. But really, it's going to come down to the everyday actions of the members on the team that are going to actually create that culture. So to me, the words are one thing. It's actually the little behaviors day in, day out that are repeated that are going to allow for success.
Wow. Jason, you mentioned going for gold. That response was pure gold, in my opinion. And I think, you mentioned something that Brene Brown brings up on occasion is to be clear is to be kind, right? And setting those clear norms and expectations off the top of your response is huge. And you hit on so many other critical pieces in leadership. I'm going to pivot just a little bit. And I want you to think about giving advice to student athletes now. So, what kind of support do they need to be successful in their journey, whether it's, at the Edge or onto University of Calgary or other places? What kind of support do they need?
One of the most important things there, Jason, is understanding the support that each and every individual is going to need, no different than you would with employees. So we spend a lot of time, and I try to impress this upon coaches at all levels, whether they're dealing with 11-year-olds or, I worked with Canada Basketball for a while. That wasn't in my little bio there, but got to work with NBA athletes and getting to know the individuals and their goals, right? Their motivations, understanding their passion, what drives them. That's going to allow a coach to truly unlock that relationship and then start to develop, almost personalize their individualized goals for that student, right? It's hard to say what support because coaches can come in with a broad brush. Oh, here are the supports that we provide, but I really want to see that individualized. And maybe that's just kind of the ethos of the Edge School coming through. As much as we do like to win, we're about personal excellence and personal development. Part of the reason I left the university system to come back to Edge was I'm a firm believer in that, trying to help kids get to that next level. So, once that understanding of a young student athlete's motivations or goals is in place, then we can kind of shape that over the course of 1 year or 4 or 5 years if you're talking about a post-secondary program. Because I said off the top, every player is going to need something different from their coach, just like every employee is going to need something different from their supervisor. Again, without that personal touch, then we're just throwing, you look in a textbook, well, how do you support a student athlete? Well, this is how. That said, there are some general things, right, that I think need to be in place or should be in place for student athletes to develop, especially from a young age moving forward up to the post-secondary and beyond into pro. First and foremost, we're talking about student athletes here. We're talking about student athletes post-secondary, so it's academic support. So again, it comes back to personalized approach to that. Someone who's has motivation to go to class, is achieving a 4.0 average, might need different support than someone who's actually needing to achieve a certain grade to stay eligible to compete the next season. So
you're
we individualize that
support? That's huge.
Yeah. Nutrition, right? We talk a lot, and I'll chat about it maybe even a little bit later on here in the pod about athlete readiness. So, are we making sure that athletes are fed the proper way to ensure that they can do what they need to do when they're called upon? And that's where, especially at Edge School, when we're dealing with younger student athletes that aren't making, they may still jump in their car and go grab McDonald's, which we hate to see. Sorry if you're aiming at McDonald's.
There goes our sponsorship show. But that was the big one we're working on. But whatever, I guess it's not a big deal.
More, that's where we target the parents. Parents are really the ones who are making decisions and deciding what's going to be put on the table at home. So really trying to educate parents there, and with nutrition, we try. I think the mental performance piece is becoming more and more important. Especially as we see so much attention being given to skill development and kids going off and doing additional ice times, additional practice, times outside of what you and I probably did as kids. Yeah. A lot of the baseline skill is there. So what separates a lot of the younger students would be the mental performance side of things. The medical and the strength and conditioning piece to me go hand in hand, right? I think a better conditioned student athlete will be able to participate for longer, probably have more enjoyment in their sport. There's reasons why we don't see young kids throwing curveballs. There's reasons why we cater our rules to allow for physical development. I think that piece is really important. But to sum up that question, I really think the individuality piece of that, getting to know the students and be able to cater those goals individually, to me is where coaches can really be impactful.
You've said a couple of things in there, which I think can be really sort of translated into leadership. Like leaders have to take care of themselves too, right? All those things are really important. They have to corral all these resources, and then leaders have to take care of others too. I'm wondering, because we had an athletic director on at the end of season 2, a good friend of mine, Carla DiFilippo. We asked her this question. So I'm going to ask this to you.
Sure.
Do you believe that coaches can make or break a team, or is it really in the hands of the players sort of once they're on the field? And the reason I ask that, because you've mentioned a couple of times about all the things that they need. And then Jason, the other Jason, mentioned Simon Sinek, and it's like, start with why, right? And Ted has a very clear why, which always doesn't resonate with his players. Sure. And so there's a bit of tension between, do we want to win this game or do we want to win the season? Do we want to win the season or do you want to make really good people? Yeah. Is that the point of sport?
Yeah.
So do you believe that coaches can make or break a team, or is it really in the hands of the players once they're on the field to play?
In prep for this episode, I definitely thought quite a bit about this question. May or may not have known it was coming. So I actually think it's coaching fully. And I'll just share a quick story. When I was interviewing or going through the process to become the athletic director at the University of Calgary, it's actually one of the first questions asked, and it was a pre-interview kind of a written response, was around your approach and your philosophy to developing a holistic athletic program, and the stakeholders involved, and kind of walk us through your process. And to me, it starts with the people leading the teams. It starts with the coaches. I feel as though, and especially it's even doubly so at the youth level, coaches make all the difference. A good coach can develop confidence, develop a lifelong passion for a sport, help foster those relationships, help develop the characteristics in sport that we all love and we aspire to, and we all look at going, hey, when we talk about sport and holding it up on a pedestal, the things that we really hold close to our heart, good coaches can bring out and lead. Coaching can have the exact opposite effect. And
I believe that.
It can kill confidence. It can isolate children. It can force student athletes to alter their academic path at the post-secondary level, which comes at a significant cost to people. So to me, it comes down to the coach. And similar to teachers, I don't think coaches, I'm not just going to lean on compensation here for a second, but the importance of a good teacher, a good coach, can really set young people up for success in life.
Nice.
I think about the relationship I've had with my university coach, Steve Konchalski, who's a living basketball legend in this, the Canadian Coach K. We still talk more than once a week. He'll call me up for advice. And I do the same for him. And we still are working to support each other in terms of, finding other opportunities for each of us in the sport. So, so I'll just go back to, I think coaching can make the difference.
All right, Jason.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, it's totally on point. We're going to jump to one of my favorite parts of each episode is a bit of the summary here, and we're going to rename the episode, Jason. So let's get to it. Do you want to take the first crack at what would you rename this episode if you take all of that in and give it a new name?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Truth and Trust.
Okay,
so,
nice.
Nice. I think really what I was thinking of there in this episode, it's really clear to see that sometimes it's not about saying, what people want to hear or the easy thing all the time. It's about saying what they need to hear. And the one thing I'm going to point to here, which we haven't talked yet about on the pod, is Rebecca's recruiting pitch to Zaba, all right, in the bathroom.
Yep.
And, everyone else is talking about pumping Zaba up, that he can do this, that he can do that. And she basically came in and said, this is what I see. and, come prove yourself. And that got to his core, and he is going to further now kind of listens to that truth and is going to trust Richmond with, the next year in his career. So I just thought that was kind of a neat tie-in.
Jason, I hope you trust this truth. That is the winner, I think, already. That, again, is pretty instrumental in all the leadership. And I love the way you've tied that to Rebecca's closing pitch to Zava. That was really good. Garth, try to top that. Go for it.
Sure. I'll come in at number 2. I don't mind. I would offer this. Sport is the ultimate metaphor. I think that this is an episode where the play on the field becomes a metaphor for the office culture. But I do like truth and trust. So Jason, do you want to come in third place?
Yeah, I'll definitely be third place this week, happily in the bronze medal position. I have winning trust, which feels very lame compared to the two of you. But we see that Richmond cares deeply about winning. But to get there, they need to build trust. And Zava has his work cut out for him in building trust with the teammates. But Trent and Roy have made major strides forward in this area. So there we have it. 1, 2, 3 in that order. Renaming
All right.
the episode.
Let's go to the leadership challenge. Jason, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to challenge both of you and really the listeners here to really check in with yourselves, right? And reflect on the standards and the values that you feel are critical to the desired culture that you're seeking in your team, your classroom, or in your workplace, that are in fact, are they really understood and are they being upheld? Right. So once that reflection takes place, then I think really the second part of that is, to make sure that you celebrate and recognize the behaviors that are congruent with the culture that you're looking to establish. But then also find those opportunities where you see that the culture isn't being upheld and the standards aren't being upheld, like we've seen in this episode, and hit them head on. Right. They may not be easy conversations, but do hit them head on, because as leaders, when we go to sleep at night and think that our, the culture that we want isn't in fact in place, that can cause us. That's where I start losing some sleep. So I want to make sure that we're going to go have those hard conversations and hopefully get everyone on the same page.
Leadership challenge accepted, Jason. And if I was talk to you like a coach, let's say you just ran a leadership clinic for us and for our listeners. And we're going to keep building off your learnings and our season 2 great lineup of guests with some bonus episodes later this season. We're inviting back some of our guests from season 2 and 3 in Guestapalooza episode. We'll see how much we like you, Jason. We might, in fact, invite you back. Okay. And we'll take on a this or that format for our listeners. So start sending us some of your leadership this or that questions, and we'll get it in our inboxes for that.
Well, if I don't get the invite now, I'll know where I stand, Jason?
We're only bringing back 10
there you
people,
go.
so
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Well, no, I think this episode is a great example of the actual, like, what started this all, right? This is a show that is not about football. This is a show that is about culture building. It's about leadership. It's about like athletes. It's about so much more. So we really appreciate you being here with us, Jason, and thanks for listening, everybody. So get those this or that questions in. And a reminder, as always, if you like what you've heard here, rate the podcast, share it with your friends, because we are still on this inane, maybe fool's chase to get Jason Sudeikis on here, but we're getting closer.
There's always room for one more Jason.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Jason, why don't you take us
until
home?
next time, keep leading the Lasso way.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Yep. Cheers, everyone.